Hi guys, welcome to another podcast with episode with horsemanship from Ginny. I'm Yaz. On this episode I'm going to be talking about associative learning, what it is. I've talked about it a little bit before in other podcasts where I've mentioned it, but I thought I'd do a bit more of a deep dive into associative learning, what it is and what the science says around horses and associative learning, and why it can be so good, why it can be problematic, why, in my opinion, it makes the horses so easy to train. Again, I apologise about the noise in the background. I'm driving. I've got a 2.5 hour drive home today, so this is probably my 4th podcast that I've recorded on this journey alone, because I've got 2.5 hours left, and I'm on my way back. So I'm using, it's where I do a lot of my thinking about horses, and I think saying stuff out loud can really help put things into context, or I can be thinking things and then I'll say it out loud and I'm like, no, that's a stupid idea, that's ridiculous, no, that's wrong. Saying it out loud really helps, so that's what my podcast is for, me to say stuff out loud. And if people disagree with me, they can disagree with me, mention them in the comments, be polite about it, don't be rude, because I'll just block you. If you agree with me or you have any questions, pop them in the comments. I do a live Q&A every fortnight for my Patreons, and that Q&A will be posted to YouTube as well. But unless you're a Patreon member, you won't be able to interact during the live. You'll just get the video at the end of it all. So, associative learning is a process where an individual learns to connect two or more unrelated events or stimuli through their co-occurrence, leading to new understanding or behaviour. So what does that mean, essentially? So, I've talked about it before in the context of a horse spooking. If a horse spooks at something and then you smack it, that horse will associate a smack with that item that it spooked at. So it will genuinely believe that item is what caused that punishment. So smacking a horse when they spook teaches them nothing that they were right, other than they were right to spook in the first place. So horses have been shown, in a study I read a little while ago now, so it might have changed since then, I'll have to look it up, that they have some of the highest associative learning capabilities of any animal on the planet. And associative learning is what gives animals very long and solid memories on things. So essentially, they place an emotion into that thing that they've learned. So, we've all heard the saying, elephants never forget. That is through associative learning. Associative learning is a very strong way of building, of creating survival instincts, building relationships. It's a very emotional way of learning. So horses have been shown they have higher associative learning capabilities than elephants. And elephants were previously thought to be have the highest associative learning capabilities. So what this means is it's both a blessing and a curse with horses, because obviously in the situation where if you smack a horse too many times to spook it at the same thing, you've got a lot of work to then fix that associative learning. The benefit to the fact that they're such strong associative learners is that they can also relearn things quite easily as well. So you can change those associations quite easily, quite quickly as well, if you do it correctly, if your timing's right, and if you do everything right, you can change the horse's associations to things very, very quickly. Most animals are associative learners on some capacity. Humans do it as well, but we also have the capabilities of logically learning through using our logic, and horses don't really have that capability as far as we know. I think they largely learn through how you make them feel. So if you make them feel bad about a thing, they're going to think that thing is bad. So if you make them feel bad while teaching them to load, if you make them feel bad while breaking them in, if you make them feel bad while in a stable, putting their bridle on, tacking them up, mounting them, anything. If you make them feel bad in those situations, those things become bad to the horse, and it becomes a trigger for those emotions. So they might not have been stressed beforehand, they could have been perfectly relaxed, and then you introduce them to a situation that you have either, well, most people do it inadvertently. If you've done it on purpose, then you're a fucking horrible person, you shouldn't be around horses. Most people inadvertently teach their horses that's something you need them to do. Farrier is a good one, that's a common one. Dentist, oftentimes these things are a bit horrible anyway, but you can make them nicer for the horse. So all these things are things that we can either make them feel good about or we can make them feel bad about, and what we make them feel is what they learn about that thing. And so, like I said, you can trigger those emotions by just presenting the scary thing. A wormer makes them feel bad. You show a horse gets a whiff that a horse that's hard to worm, if they get an inkling that you're going to worm them, they're going to go straight back to that emotion, and you're going to have to calm them down. Fighting them through it is only going to make them worse. Someone just got a speeding ticket. So yeah, you've got to be careful how you do things with horses. This is why you've got to be thoughtful when you're teaching horses things, and why it's really important to make things a good experience. We all know about the leaving it on a good note thing, but it's not as simple as that. For example, we've just had a horse, I've just been to load a horse, and I've done the first handover session with the owner, and what she's going to do now is go away and work on getting the horse comfortable with being shut in the lorry. I've talked about this on the other podcast. I don't like to waste sessions on desensitization unless they need me. Say if she tries for a week or so and it's not getting any better, it's just getting worse, I'll come back and I'll intervene and I'll help her. But largely, what my point is I just did a handover session, and we started working on her learning to teach the horse how to stand in the lorry without closing the partition while she steps away from the horse. Because it's really important when loading a horse, we can tie them up, step away from them, and they're not freaking out at that point. Because then if you start closing the barrier on them and they're freaking out just at the idea of being tied up, you've gone too far. So this horse already has a poor association to loading. She had a lot of vets trips. I think she had lameness issues. And so every time she went in a lorry, she was going to a vet, she was being stabbed, prodded, poked and jabbed, whatever. She built up a poor association to loading. So now that she gets that feeling of all those horrible emotions she had at the vets, they all present themselves when it comes to asking her to go on the lorry. So we've worked on the loading. She understands the loading now. She can go in and out of the lorry, no problem, no issues. She's really good at that. Now we've got to desensitize her and change her association to being shut in the lorry. So what happened is I did the initial desensitization to make sure we're at a place where I could hand her over. Because if I'd have turned up and she'd have had a bad day, it wasn't the day to hand her over to her owner. We'd do it next week. But yeah, so her owner's now going to go away and work on that. But what happened in the session today was she'd already done a bit of work with me. So we're already asking her to do more than she's previously done, because now I've got to hand her over and she's got to do it with her owner. I used treats with her because she's very introverted mare, and she was starting to shut down a little bit in the loading. So to pique her curiosity, I added treats. I started using treats for her, and she's now buzzing. The idea of loading, she's like, Mint, I'm going to get loads of treats, this is awesome. To the point where when I handed the lead rope over, she wanted to stick with me. But for her owner at the minute, she needs to get the handle of the methods first, so I didn't give her treats. She had no treats for it. She just needs to get the handle of the methods. If she used treats, there's the risk of the mare becoming very treat orientated, not focusing on what she's doing, and then that takes a bit more skill to be able to make sure the horse is paying attention to what they're doing, not just blindly following treats, because that's how they end up falling off ramps, slipping off the edge of ramps and hurting themselves, and then going, that was terrifying, I didn't know that was... It was because they weren't paying attention. They were just blindly following treats, which is something we don't want them to do. So yeah, what happened during the session was she did some loading sessions up and down the ramp up and down the ramp a few times, and then we worked on her being able to not tie her up, but put the rope through the loop, through the ring. And she was holding the end of the rope, and she stepped away from the horse to a place where she would be able to close the partition, and we never got to, I closed the partition on her a little bit, but I didn't do too much with it. I just wanted to set her up for this is where it's going to go, and I showed her owner how to progress with the loading. So like I said in my loading course, it's not about me just fixing the horse's behaviour, it's about the owners knowing how to prevent the issues from reoccurring. So I need her to be able to work through these problems with her and work through her discomfort. If I do it all, it defeats the purpose of the loading course, and takes up a lot of sessions that the owner could be doing. Sunman. Yeah, so what happened was, when we got to the bit where the owner was asking the horse to stay in the position where she would be able to close the partition up, the last time she did it really well. She did a fantastic job. She came off calmly. She was really good. Then we turned around and she became reluctant to come back up the ramp. She's been doing it perfectly. She became reluctant to come back up the ramp. And I knew this was going to happen because I said to her owner, we're going to do this one more time where we ask her to stand still, because we'd done it twice before that, and this was the last time. We're going to ask her to stand still at the bottom of the ramp, at the top of the ramp, at the back of the lorry, where she will have to stand when we close her in. If we do one more session, if we do one more rep of that, she's going to start refusing to come in, because it's hard for her and it's stressful. So what we do when we do something really stressful with the horse is then we make it really easy. So she'd started to associate the lorry with stress again, and so what I got her owner to do was, after she'd done that, she took her off, she brought her back up to the ramp, brought her back up to the top of the lorry, and let her turn around and face out of the lorry straight away. There was no more expectations for her to stand in a position that made her feel like she was going to get shut in. So, and because she wasn't asked to, she then went and picked up a load of, I think, haylage that was on the floor at the back of the lorry. It's the first time she dropped her head to eat off the floor in the lorry. So that was a fantastic step. But like I said, the associations of stress started to come back because she was asked to stay there. With her owner as well, it's slightly different when I do it. And that's what she's going to go and work on. And so she's going to change those associations. When the horse stands nicely, she doesn't particularly have to be not stressed at this moment in time. She just has to handle herself. And as she starts to handle herself and not show such outward signs of stress, pouring and things like that, like behaviours you would deem bad behaviours, I suppose. They're not necessarily bad behaviours. Obviously horses don't have a concept of good and bad. That's neither here nor there. We perceive them as bad behaviours. We don't want a horse pouring in the lorry. They're going to start tearing the rubber matting up. They're going to do damage. We want the horses not to do that. We want them to chill out and just travel nicely. So any signs of her just holding herself and controlling herself will eventually lead to her going, oh, it's not that bad, because when I stand here nicely I get to come out. And then we can slowly start to extend the amount of time she can do that for, and she'll relax and she'll start to work through her problems and start to work through all the issues with it, and she'll just settle down. because unfortunately when you're doing loading training, you can't do the groundwork in the lorry to get the horse to calm itself down. You can't physically manipulate the body for them. They have to work it out on their own. And I've done this loading with loads of horses, and they all come out at the end of it travelling really nicely, working really well for various different problems. The process is fairly the same. So yeah, we had to then make it really easy for her for the last session, for the last rep. Make it really easy, and she could come back off. That's the session done. Well done. If we'd have left it on that one where she stood nicely, although it was a good rep, it was a stressful rep for her. So we have to take that stress down, and so when we leave the horse on the good note, it's not just a session that we perceive as a good note, it has to be something they see as a good note. So she went up, she was a little bit sticky to go up the ramp because she thought she was going to be asked to stand there. She wasn't asked to stand there, she ate a bit of haylage anyway. Then she turned round, she stood at the top of the ramp for a bit, her owner came down to the bottom of the ramp and left her up there for a second, and then she very quietly walked away down the ramp. That is a good rep. The one before that wouldn't have been a good rep, because then what we also want to happen is the latent learning. I'll talk about latent learning more in depth in a podcast, but essentially it's they leave on a good note and they learn better. That's what latent learning is. So I've gone on a little bit of a tangent, but to explain a bit more about associative learning and give a bit of context to it. So associative learning, like I said, it can be a blessing, it can be a curse. Why can it be a blessing? Because in my opinion, associative learning is one of the easiest types of learning to train with. Horses are far easier to train than people. People think too much. Horses solely follow how it feels. Does it feel good? Does it feel bad? I'm going to avoid the bad, I'm going to go for the good. As long as we make things feel good for the horse, they'll do it all day long. Because it feels good to them. That is the aim of what I do with horses, and what I want them to do is to search for the good feeling and to teach the owners how to make the feeling good for them. So that's why it's a blessing. I think, like I said, it's the easiest way to train an animal. Make them feel good. That's the easiest thing on the planet to teach a horse. It's how to feel good about something. Even when the thing we're doing isn't nice. Even if we're treating a sore bit on your back. If you tolerate me doing it, I'll give you a treat. A really high value treat as well. So there's different value in treats and things like that. High value treats are also really important when doing horrible things to horses. It has to be worth it for them. You can't give them a handful of shitty molasses free diet chaff for having, I don't know, not that you'd ever do that, but say you were stitching a wound up on a horse and not sedating them to do it. They'd probably stand for it if you give them a high enough value treat for doing so. Horses can tolerate a hell of a lot just for a treat, and as long as you make it worth it for them. So it can be a blessing. It's the easiest way to teach an animal to do anything you want. Make it feel good, even if it's hard, even if it's painful, but make it good for them, make it worth it for them. They'll learn that makes them feel good, because even if stitching them up might not have felt good in the moment, now there's not got an open wound that's letting air into it, stinging like fox. So things like that. Vaccinations. Teeth is a little tricky. Have I gone on the toll? No, I haven't. I haven't got the money for this toll, M6 toll. I don't think it's taking me on a toll. I'll avoid it anyway. It's a blessing in that case. In the case of it being a curse, is, like I said, it creates some of the longest memories. And long memories, when you've taught them something's bad, is not easy to fix always. I say not easy, it is easy. Teaching horses things that have previously been bad to turning them into something good is easy. The steps are easy, the process is easy. It can be long, but it's not very complicated. Obviously, depends on how good you are, your timing, your placement of your awards, all that sort of stuff. It depends on your skill level and your ability to train a horse and understand I need to be in that lane. Your ability to train a horse and understand a horse is... 1 second, I need to be in that lane. Will largely determine how much progress you make and how quickly it goes. But if you've had a horse, say it's 20 years old, all its life it's been battered by a farrier, you can have a fucking long time fixing that problem. It's always been a nightmare for the farrier. What lane? Where does it want me? Over there. It's always been a nightmare for the farrier. It's always had a rough time with the farrier. You've got 20 years of work to undo there. 20 years of associative learning to undo. That is going to take time. And also, a lot of farriers don't have the time to stand around and do the training. So oftentimes it's better just to sedate them. But that's by the by. Things like that. Depends on how long they've been doing it for. Young horses, changing their association to things more often than not is easy work. Depends again, it depends on how long they've been doing it for. If it's a homebred horse and it's never left the home, it's always been with the same people, they've been doing it since the day they were born, and it's now 5 years old. That's 5 years worth of training. That's 5 years worth of associative learning that it's got. Whereas, say it's a 3-year-old and it started this behaviour at 2.5 years old, you've got 6 months worth of associative learning. So time makes a difference, skill level makes a difference, knowledge, all that stuff. Obviously, the more you know, the quicker things go, the less mistakes you make. If you get it right the first time, you don't have to go back and fix it. All that jazz that most people understand about horse training. Some people don't understand it at all and get frustrated when I can do things with their horse and settle their horse down when they can't, and it's like, this is my job, this is why you've hired me. That's kind of how it works. I'm a professional, you're not. You've asked me for help because you can't do this, and now you've got to learn, and unfortunately that just takes time. And you may not learn it in time for the horse you've currently got. That's not the end of the world. As long as you remember that and you learn from it and you go on with your next horse and you do better, great, well done. That's all that matters. Not everything we learn is learning for the current horse. Sometimes it's too late for that. So that's where it's a curse, because it creates long-lasting memories. You can have a horse. It's also what makes horses so good at being like... You get a lot of people that are like, you're used to wheelbarrows. Why is that wheelbarrow spooking you? Because it's not supposed to be there. They're very good at that, knowing where things are supposed to be. There's never a wheelbarrow in the middle of the school. Why the fuck is there a wheelbarrow in the middle of the school? How's it got there? Why is it there? All that stuff. That stuff can be really unsettling for a horse because of their associative learning. I know where wheelbarrows are supposed to be. It's really important though when we're training our horses with things like, if you've got a horse that's particularly sensitive and would get upset about stuff like that, you've got to make sure that you change things up for them and you do random shit with them, and they just learn that part of life is random things end up being in random places, and it's not a big deal. But what you can't do is punish them for it. Punishment for anything like that, any poor emotions, is just going to make it worse, and it's going to set in that they were right in the first place. They were right to be concerned about that thing, because now it hurts. Now it's bit them. In their eyes, very rarely do horses associate punishment from a rider over when they're focused on something else to do with that rider telling them off. In their eyes, I looked at that thing and I got bit on my arse, so that thing bites. It's a very plain and simple way of learning, which again makes things very easy or very difficult depending on how you approach it. the thing is with associative learning as well is it can be bloody quick. So, for example, it's a big thing with loading that I have to be very careful about. So, one thing I always tell my clients is do not micromanage your horse's feet, because the horse will blame you when that hurts. They'll blame the whole situation, they'll blame you. If you let your horse, say for example, you're backing your horse off the ramp, you've tried to stop them from going off in one direction, they are going that way regardless, leave them to it. Don't get involved, that is your choice. I tried to stop you, I tried to help you, and you didn't let me, and now you've scraped your cannonbone down the side of the ramp. So, mate, that was your choice, you make that decision. Yes, it's a bit of a pain in the arse, and I know people don't want the horses getting injured, having to have time off, whatever. Sometimes they've got to learn the consequences of their decisions. And all you're doing then at that point is going to them, next time, you're going to listen to me this time? Chances are they will. They don't then blame you for it. Sometimes horses need their feet micromanaging, especially in the early days of asking a horse to back off. If you're going to take that responsibility, make sure you're in control. If you lose control at any point of the micromanaging of the feet and where they're placing them, leave them to it. Stop taking control. Only control and micromanage your horse's feet while they will allow you to do it. It is their decision whether they will accept your help or not. If the answer is no, you do this. Whatever consequences they will lie, you can lie in the bed that you are making. That is how it works with that. I'm not taking responsibility for you hurting yourself. I tried to help you. I tried to prevent this. I could see it happening. And then if the more often than not, the horse goes, that was a bit silly, shouldn't have done that. And then next time they listen to you. Or obviously it depends on how badly they hurt themselves. I obviously try not to let the horses hurt themselves, but sometimes a little bit of pain makes them realise what the actual consequences are. Environmental consequences are as well. They're not consequences I'm giving to them, they're environmental consequences to their decisions. So yeah, that's essentially associative learning, why it's what it is, why it can be a blessing, why it can be a curse, how to use it to your favour. It's very simple. Make things feel good. If you make things feel good to your horses when they do them, it sounds simple. It obviously in practice it's a lot harder than that. You've got a horse. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much into depth with it now because I'm ending the podcast, but yeah, I'm ending this episode, but it sounds a lot more simple than it is. Make it feel nice for them. That's easier said than done when you've already got a horse that has developed behavioural issues over that thing, because then you've got to deal with the behavioural issue as well. You just want to make your horses feel good. How you do that, there are a million different ways to do that. You can do that through body work, you can do it through groundwork, you can do it through R+ training, you can do it through natural horsemanship training. There are loads of different types of trainers out there. If you don't like my methods, you can use other people's methods. There's TRT, there's Clinton Anderson if you really want to use him, Pat Pirelli, obviously Monty Roberts was a big one. He's not as popular as he used to be. There's a girl called Nadine on Instagram, Featherlight on Instagram. There's a guy called Bartosz who is working with Olivia Towers at the minute. He's a really good trainer from what I've seen. I've not actually seen him in person. I've not seen a lot of what he does, but he seems to do good stuff. All sorts of different trainers doing different things in different ways. Different methods will work better for different people and different horses. It's largely finding what works for you, what you're comfortable doing, because there's no point coming to me and being uncomfortable with the methods I use and trying to use them, because if you're uncomfortable with the methods I use, you're not going to put them in properly. You're not going to say you don't like the pressures that I use, or you don't like the fact that I do use punishment in my training. You're not then going to implement it in a way that is going to be effective and work for your horse. So if you don't like something that your trainer is doing, either talk to them and they will find a way around it, because I've got loads of different methods. I worked with loads of different trainers, loads of different things under my belt. If you don't like the way I'm doing it, because it can be simple as it doesn't make me feel good and I don't want to do that to my horse, that's fine. That is a perfectly justifiable reason to want to use a different trainer. I have no issues with any of that. As long as you're doing what's right by your horse, you're finding ways. It just may mean it can mean you're going through 6 different trainers to find the right methods. It doesn't mean the trainers are bad. It just means you're not keen on the methods. Maybe it doesn't work best for your horse. Maybe they've never experienced the problem your horse is going through, so they're kind of experimenting their way through. You can either let them, if you're willing to pay them for that, for muddling their way through to find out how to work with that horse, or you can find someone who knows exactly how to deal with that behaviour. Chances are, it's entirely up to you what you do with your horse, what you're comfortable doing with your horse. As long as you're making things feel good for your horse, you will improve. So I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Have a good day. I will see you on the next one.